Hey guys, my name is Lorraine Chimka. Thank you for tuning in today. Join me as I talk about all things law, productivity, and personal development with other stuff slipped in. Today's video is going to be slightly different because I am partial to a bit of YouTube drama, and in the spirit of YouTube dramas, no, this is not an apology video, but I am doing a story time in some ways. Now, as we all know, winter is coming, also known as it's application season. And given the volume of messages that I've been receiving and reflecting back on my own journey, it got me thinking about why I started this in the first place. Well, blogging in 2014 and why I continue to do what I do now. It's because back then I really didn't have anyone who looked like me, sounded like me, or anyone really being so open about the struggles they were going through. So today's video, I want to address being mindful and the basically mental health effects of this season, i.e. mostly law students in the first and second year, or any student considering a career in law, trying to do applications, trying to prepare for exams, revision, and do applications in the middle of an apocalypse. So let's get into it. Now, before I fully begin, obviously, with my story time, I do want to caveat this with this is just a reflection on my own experience. I am not purporting to be an armchair therapist or giving mental health advice, but I will do my best to link in the description below services that you can use if you are feeling overwhelmed or need someone to talk to during this time. With that being said, I do think there is value in sharing our stories and a human connection, and hopefully some of you will be able to take away something from this that you can relate to or can be of an inspiration or some form of comfort during this time. So let's begin. Now, in order for this to make sense, I do need to give you a bit of context about my educational background in some ways. Please don't take this as me bragging, but I think it's been hard won over years of self-reflection and just in retrospect, looking back on my journey so far. You might be thinking, Lorraine, what does this have to do with mental health and applications season rather? So let's rewind. So for this to make sense, let's go back in time a little bit. So originally, I studied law at UCL in London between 2013 and 2016. Originally, I'm from Zimbabwe when I was 10 years old. So technically speaking, I was the first in my family to go to university in the UK like that, let alone trying to pursue a career in the law. Now, I was also one of those annoying people who was like, I want to be a lawyer, but didn't really appreciate what that meant because obviously, I didn't know what it meant. And when I applied to university and I did my UCAS, I applied to law for, I know, genuinely speaking, the academic pursuit of law. I was quite naive in that I didn't make the connection between studying law academically versus pursuing a career in the law. I didn't really know what that meant. So when I say that, for example, if we reflect on my choices at uni, I applied to Oxford, Christchurch, Durham, King's College, UCL and York. I got interviewed at Oxford, got an offer from UCL and King's, and interviewed at York as well, and didn't get into Durham. From that alone, that should tell you everything you needed to know about 18-year-old Lorraine. She was a bit big-headed, shall I say, because I'm not gonna lie, I was one of those annoying people that was like, oh no, the exam was hard, but I knew I'd done well. When it came to GCSEs and A-levels, I found them really easy, only because the education level in Zimbabwe is quite advanced in some ways. So I'd done really difficult stuff before. My dad was used to be a maths lecturer and is an engineer and self-taught developer as well. So I was always quite intellectually curious. I grew up around just reading encyclopedias for fun. So I was one of those people where I didn't necessarily find school hard. I found it fun. I was a nerd. And if I'm honest, I was complacent and I didn't really have to try. So imagine that overachieving, annoying person who always wins. Yep, that was me. But not for long. So, like I said, the main reasons why I applied to those 5 universities was I was being very cocky because I was like, oh, how could I not get in? Ha 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 ha. Yeah, after my Oxford interview, I doubted myself a lot and whether I was smart enough and all that kind of fun. I was going to say we've all been there, but I don't want to be that person right now. But then also when I got to UCL, I was quite naive about what it meant to study law. Like I said, I never really had to try before. So then I tried to apply the same methods that I'd used in college and GCSEs, where I was like, oh, I can look at a page, remember where it is, and just regurgitate an exam. But obviously, as we all know, law school is a different ball game. I would say it's a humbling equalizer because you think you're smart, then you're surrounded by smart people who are smarter than you, and then you realize how average you are. So there was that to contend with. On top of that, like I said, one of the reasons I chose UCL personally was because of its jurisprudential nature. Obviously, as you may or may not know, Jeremy Bentham was one of the founders of UCL. And obviously, I just found that aspect of philosophy, questioning what is law, why is law, etc., very fascinating. So that's the context. Now, cue first year, winter, then you suddenly discover the wonderful world of networking events with canapes. You're being schmoozed, big city law firms saying you're going to be paid $100,000 a year if you apply. Then I realized all of a sudden there was this whole other world of law that I'd never really considered. On top of that, I was working part-time to support myself during university. So that was the perfect melting pot of feeling inadequate, not doing well academically, feeling dumb, and suddenly not being the best anymore. And I know you might be thinking, oh my gosh, woe is you, boohoo, big tears. But it was a huge shift. And I think, to be fair, I'm grateful that it happened because I feel like I would have been one of those insufferable people who post their revision notes and pretend like it's neat and it's all cool and just going to networking events all the time. That's not it. It was character developing, reluctantly, but I'm glad it happened. So, like I said, I was quite naive as to what the academic aspect meant, but then also pursuing a career in law. Now, you can imagine that melting pot over first and second year. My grades, like Fight Club, we don't talk about it. I did have some successes with fact schemes and interviews, but obviously my grades were I got the whole rainbow, guys. I had the Desmond D and I had firsts as well. I was a well-rounded queen, but not in a good way. So it really knocked my confidence. And I think, like I said, it was a good thing to happen. But in the context of applying for law firms as well, the reason why I say law is not a personality is because in first and second year, I grew this unhealthy habit of linking my personal identity so closely as to whether or not I had a vac scheme, open day, or lawfare upcoming. And I would consider myself a very strong person and not easily susceptible to valuing myself with an outside thing. But I think when you're a law student, especially in that kind of melting pot, it can be very hard to distinguish between failure and linking that failure to your identity, especially on top of that when everyone's posting I'm delighted to announce that I've been invited to an open day from the internet. So with that being said, after second year, I made the conscious decision not to apply to vac schemes in the same way, only because I realized in that moment it would serve me more to step away and then come back. So by that I mean, I found that sometimes you can't do everything. Something has to give. And in that moment, I said to myself, you know what, Lorraine? First of all, law is not going anywhere. Law firms are always going to need trainees. Second of all, I'm only how old was I then? 19, 20 years old maybe? I can't remember now. It's a long time ago. It's been 80 long years. But I just figured, you know what? This is such a huge decision. And the reason why I say that is because when you sign up for a training contract, as you may or may not know, that's 2 years of your life signed away. So imagine going straight from university, training contract, lawyer. who are you then if your identity hasn't been formed? I'm not saying that's true for everyone, but for me, it certainly was. I didn't know who Lorraine was. And I certainly think if I'd gotten a training contract back then, I would be a miserable lawyer right now. So I made the decision to explore what else was out there, develop my skills, and discover who exactly I wanted to be as a person. And that's why I always say law is not a personality, it's a profession, it's a job, but it's not who you are, and you should not be defined by whether or not you've got X many of interviews, etc. But again, some of you may understand that when you're in the middle of all that stress, it's really hard to separate, right? So I just want to first of all give the message here with this video that it's okay to doubt. It's okay to take a step back and really question whether this is for you. It's okay to take some time out and say, you know what, actually, for example, here, I'm just going to focus on my academics and then think about a career afterwards, which is what I did. So second year, in third year at UCL, you get to choose your electives at the end of second year. And I just said, you know what, Lorraine, instead of trying to pander to what I think law firms want from me, I am just going to choose subjects that I like. So in my final year at UCL, I did Roman law, which I absolutely loved. I did lawyer's practice in ethics, which is kind of like this hybrid course that was being run. And then I did corporate insolvency, which I found really fun because it was more about the jurisprudential theory about corporate insolvency rather than the Companies Act's type of insolvency. And then, of course, as you may or may not know, I did information technology law at LSE, because if you go to a University of London University, you can choose another elective from another department. And I think that was one of the best decisions that I've ever done, because clearly it's given me all this wealth of experience that I now have. So for example, by doing that course, I was introduced to the Society for Computers and Law, and eventually I ended up sitting on the board for the Society for Computers and Law and meeting people such as Richard Susskind, Sir Tim Clement-Jones, and like doing a speech about the rule of law in the digital era. On top of that, by doing lawyer's practice and ethics, I did my dissertation on the future of law and technology, and eventually that won me the Best Future International Lawyer Award from the International Association of Young Lawyers. Actually, I should just like have the award. I'll do that later. Ding. And all these other experiences I wouldn't have had. For example, working in fintech, I wouldn't have learned how to code in a quasi-code language and all the skills I've developed. All that being said, sometimes you don't know when a detour is the right thing to do. I'm not going to lie to you and say, oh yeah, I knew like taking this decision would lead this way, because I didn't. But I knew ultimately that my mental health and peace mattered more than trying to do everything, i.e. essay deadlines, applying to law firm deadlines coming up in December, trying to keep up with my grades, trying to keep up with my extracurriculars, and all that kind of jazz. So the purpose of this video really is to say, if you are feeling overwhelmed in the season, it's okay. I would take the time to really be introspective, really reflect, actually, that is there something that can give for now? So look at the short-term gains, look at the long-term gains, make the appropriate decision. In retrospect, one of the best things I've ever done, because, for example, if I'd applied to something like this, for example, the Clifford Chance Ignite training contract back then, I wouldn't have got it, but I was in the right place at the right time. It's really hard to not compare yourself in law school. Again, I was reflecting that back then, thankfully, in some ways, there wasn't social media or LinkedIn in the same way. And I can imagine just how overwhelming and daunting it can seem when everyone's like, I've got a virtual scheme, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this, I've got that. I would say delete it if you have to, mute it if you have to, and make the right decision for you. I just wish someone had said this to me. And again, that when I say law is not your personality, I'm not kind of being snide or anything, but it's literally true. You are a young person, or which is mostly my audience, that you are a young person. You've got so much life ahead of you. This is not the end. This is not the be all, and this does not define you. Failure is only failure if it's not a lesson, and take that from me, from experience. I know sometimes even myself, I fall and I feel really overwhelmed with things, but I think one of the biggest assets that I've got is my dad always used to say to me, you know what, Lorraine, Many law students have done this before you, and many after you will do this. So why not you? And if ever you feel overwhelmed, the best way to eat an elephant is to start one bite at a time, and before you know it, you'll have eaten the whole elephant. So that was quite short and sweet. I will probably do a part 2 because there's so much I want to cover about how I dealt with mental health up and downs at university that's not always talked about. But I hope this gives you some form of comfort to know that someone else has been through it. Whatever decision-making process you're going through right now, it's valid, and it's okay to take a step back if you need to. I will link below in the description some of the resources that I've found from Law Care and the Law Society, if there is someone that you need to talk to, and just know that you have so much life ahead of you and this is not the end. Thank you guys for listening, and join me next time.